Hello class, Mr. Fino here. This is Unit 7, Lesson 3 on life in two city-states, Athens and Sparta. And so here we have images of Athens on the right, Athens on the left and Sparta on the right. Athens being a city near the water, near a port, near a harbor, and Sparta being inland and more isolated. So in this lesson, you will learn the major differences between Athens and Sparta. So here's a map showing the locations. So as you can see here, Athens is over here on the mainland, kind of on the end of the mainland, very near to the sea, whereas Sparta is inland on Peloponnesus, which is the peninsula or attached by this small piece of land. All right, so let's start with Athenian government. So for an Athenian government, only citizens, being free men 18 years and older, could participate in the government. And the Council of 500 ran the daily government and suggested laws. And this Council of 500 was selected each year from all free men 30 years and older. And then we have the Assembly, which consisted of 6,000 citizens that met on the, pronounce this right, let's see if I can get it. I think it's Pinix, I don't know, to debate and vote on laws. So with the Assembly, the 6,000 citizens that were needed, if fewer people attended a meeting, like less than 6,000, what they would do is slaves armed with ropes that were dipped in red paint would be sent out to collect more citizens. So if they got you with red paint, you had to go up and join the assembly. And it is said that Athenian men were embarrassed to appear in red stained clothes at these meetings because it says, they weren't trying to participate in the first place. So here we have a picture probably of the Council of 500. At the assembly, you can see a lot more people in this pack. Then we have the pinks or the location of the assembly. All right, next we've got Spartan government. So Sparta's government was an oligarchy, as you see here on the left, this dedicated to military strength. So an oligarchy, what that means is it's a small group of people, right? And so on the left here, we have probably the Council of Elders, right, which consisted of 2 kings and 28 other men. The 2 kings having equal power, as you see here, and the other 28 were all elected by the Spartan assembly. And to be on the Council of Elders, you had to be 60 years of age or older, all right? You had to be from a noble family, and some believe that the assembly voted for candidates by shouting, but just to, and the loudest support would be given to the winner, the people that would be elected. All right. Continuing on with Spartan government, the council prepared laws for the assembly to vote on. So this is not Spartan history. This is probably U.S. history, but you see people here preparing laws. And Sparta had an assembly like Athens consisting of free men. But whereas in the Athenian assembly, they could discuss and debate and do all that stuff. In the Spartan assembly members could only vote on laws with a yes or a no. And that was it. Okay. All right. Next, we'll go on to Athenian economy. So first, you need to know what an economy is. The economy is the way in which a community or region organizes the production and exchange of money, food, products, and services to meet the people's requirements. So pretty much getting things where they need to be, businesses, the government's dealings, all that. All right. So Athens depended on trade because they couldn't produce enough food, right? They didn't have the soil and the land they needed. So they depended on trade, right, with other city-states, with foreigners. And Athens had an ideal location near the sea, as you can see here, and a good harbor. And they were able to acquire wood from Italy, like here, it's me, Mario, and grain from Egypt. Athens traded honey, olive oil, silver, and pottery for those goods we just mentioned. And the people of Athens traded for food and goods at a marketplace called the Agora, a big open space in the middle of town. And Athens also developed its own coins from gold, silver, and bronze, which we can see on this coin. We've got the goddess Athena, which makes sense. It's Athens, right? Got its name from Athena. And Athena's favorite bird, the owl. So one side Athena, the other side the owl. Sparta relied on for the Spartan economy. They relied on farming and conquest of other peoples, right? So they had more land that was good for farming, but if they didn't have enough, food or land, they went and they stole it from their neighbors, right? Because all men to the age of 60 served in the military, they needed to find others to do other important tasks. So what happened was conquered villagers, were known as helots, helots, became slaves of the Spartans. So here we can see helots here, and they had to give Spartans much of their food. Now, with the helots, they were often allowed to stay in their villages and stuff, but they still had to give up, their crops. More of the Spartan economy. The Spartans used free non-citizens to do many other things. So they made shoes. So free non-citizens. So not men, not landowning men, um, to do other things. So they made shoes, red cloaks for soldiers. Right, there's the iconic red cloak, and conducted trade with other city-states. Sparta did not typically trade because it worried new ideas would weaken the government. They want to bring in new ideas. Spartans traded with heavy iron bars to discourage stealing, which is quite interesting. Because so according to legend, an ancient Spartan leader decided to use this form of money to discourage stealing. Because an iron bar had little value, a thief would have needed to steal a wagon load of bars to make the theft worthwhile. So people didn't really want to trade with them because these weren't worth anything, right? And yeah. Next, we go on to Athenian education. So Athens believed the purpose of education was to produce good citizens, right? Those people that would be able to, go and debate and discuss things and do public speaking. They believed that book learning and physical training were equally important. Boys were taught at home until 6 or 7 by either their mothers or sometimes slaves would teach them, and then went to school until the age of 14, where they learned reading, writing, and arithmetic and literature, right? Arithmetic being mathematics, basic math, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, all that stuff. And then to build strength, boys learned gymnastics and wrestling, right? But again, this idea of they wanted them to be well-rounded citizens. All right, more on Athenian education here. So they boys in Athens also learned to sing and play the lyre. Men began their military training at age 18, so that's more reasonable than what you're going to see for Sparta. Wealthy men could get private tutors to learn debate and public speaking for the government, but again, they had to have money to hire them. And then girls learned cooking, cleaning, spinning, and weaving from their mothers, so the household um, tasks. And then this is interesting. Girls usually married at age 15, but poorer girls had more choice as to who they married because girls in families with money, their fathers would set them up with other wealthy families. As for a Spartan education, education in Sparta focused on producing strong men and women that could defend the city-state. Right? They were so extreme about this concern, that if a baby was born sickly or didn't look strong, sickly infants were likely to be abandoned. Right? So that's very intense. From age 7, boys received their military education in the barracks. So just imagine bare bones, like basic um, shelter, not comfortable because the Spartans did not believe in comfort. Reading and writing were taught, but not important. And Spartans boys were taught to suffer any amount of physical pain. So they marched without shoes, and they were not well fed. And also, they were encouraged to steal, right, as long as they weren't caught. And so, one interesting story about that just shows the extremes of it were um, one Spartan legend tells of a boy who was so hungry he stole a fox to eat. But seeing his teacher coming, the boy quickly hid the fox under his cloak. The boy chose to let the fox bite him in the stomach rather than be caught stealing by his teacher. So it just shows you how extreme they were. At age 20, Spartan men were given a difficult test of fitness, military ability, and leadership skills. If they passed that test, they became a soldier and full citizen. So this image here shows us men, successful in that, and they continued living in the barracks that were mentioned earlier until the age of 30, when they could finally live with their wife and their family. So they were able to rejoin their family. And then girls received some military training, including wrestling, boxing, foot racing, and gymnastics. So here's a sculpture of what a Spartan woman might have looked like. And then we have women enslaved in Athens. So women were not citizens and couldn't own property, vote, or choose their husband. Right? While few women had jobs in the market or as priestesses, most had the greatest influence in the home. So that's where their power was going to remain, at home, taking care of the kids, doing all that stuff. Most Athenians owned at least one slave who were born into slavery or captured in war. So that's how they became slaves in Athens. So you had to be very, very poor not to have at least one slave. Some slaves taught Athenian children, which is quite interesting to me, trained as artisans or worked in farms or factories. And then other slaves worked in silver mines, which were very dangerous. Then we have women enslaved in Sparta, which the situation was quite different for women in Sparta. So women in Sparta led simple lives and were expected to stay fit in case they needed to protect the city state. So think of it this way. A lot of the time, the men were away fighting, right? So they needed someone to take care of business at home, and that went to the women. So they had rights. They had more rights than women of Athens. They could speak to their husband's friends, own and control their own property, and even marry a second time if their husband never came back. Maybe he died or just never came back from war. And then as for the slaves or helots, they were vastly outnumbered. Um, they vastly outnumbered the Spartans. There's way more helots than there were Spartans. So um, the Spartans had to find ways to control them. So they mistreated the helots and often declared war on them to control their numbers. So there's a story that goes this way. So it said that the Spartan government once asked the helots to choose their best fighters, saying that these slaves would be set free as thanks for their fighting for Sparta. So the helots selected 2,000 men. And immediately the Spartans killed every one of them to eliminate the possibility of any future helot leaders. So that's how extreme they were in controlling the helots. Right? Pretty crazy. But they did have some rights, like helots could marry, pass their name on to their children, and sell leftover crops that weren't given to the Spartans. So, in conclusion, in this lesson, you learn the major differences between Athens and Sparta. All right, thank you.